Good morning. Um, I decided to take a break in the. I think we got covered up to 9 or 10 so far, but yesterday was pretty busy. So I read Damon's comment about keep it simple, stupid, and giving people answers, and I think the point is being missed about what this book is about and what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to give answers. Critical thing is about answers, finding answers for yourself. How do you do that in a world of confusion? Clarity of thinking. And so this is about giving you tools, your own mind, not giving you answers, but about how to find answers for yourself. That's what this is about. So I thought it would probably be good to read the introduction to the book. This is a bit long, so if you don't have the time for that, either break it into pieces or you don't need to watch it. But this gives you an overview about what the book is trying to teach you and what it's about and why I'm doing it. It's not to be Mr. Know-It-All. It is about trying to help us all, including myself, develop better tools for clear thinking in this world where people try to tell you what to think. I don't believe in keep it simple, stupid. That's fine for questions of the first type where there is one answer, like fixing your television. That's where it is. Read the fucking manual, as they call it, where you find the answer how to make a sandwich, a tuna sandwich. How do you set up your remote? How do you answer a mathematical question? Those are all keep it simple, stupid kinds of questions. But things like morality, things like what's happening with the environment, things like what's happening with what you believe in your life, those are not keep it simple, stupid kind of questions. Not for me. If they're for you, then this video isn't for you. Go in your own way, do what you need to do. That's fine. For those of us who are trying to engage this and trying to improve our thinking, that's what this is for. So let me read the introduction, and it will be a while. So take it for what it is. So, introduction to 30 Days to Better Thinking and Better Living Through Critical Thinking, a guide for improving every aspect of your life. Introduction. Thinking is skilled work. It is not true that we are naturally endowed with the ability to think clearly and logically without learning how or without practicing. People with untrained minds should no more expect to think clearly and logically than those people who have never learned and never practiced can expect to find themselves good carpenters, golfers, bridge players, pianists. You have to train that mind. Yet our world is full of people who apparently do suppose that thinking is entirely unskilled work, that thinking clearly and accurately is so easy and so natural that anybody can think, and that anybody's thinking is quite as reliable as any other person's. Quote from A.E. Manders' Clear Thinking, Logic for Every Man, 1938, published. There is nothing we can do as humans that does not involve thinking. Our thinking tells us what to believe, what to reject, what is important, what is unimportant, what is true, what is false, who are our friends, who our enemies are, how we should spend our time, what jobs we should pursue, where we should live, who we should marry, how we should parent. Everything we know, believe, want, fear, and hope for, our thinking tells us. It's like breaking in. It's like your brain is the machine, the car, if you will, but you have to learn how to drive the car. The car doesn't drive itself. And I don't believe in self-driving cars anyway. I think that's a prescription for disaster. It follows then that the quality of our lives is primarily determined by the quality of our thinking. Our thinking has implications for how we go about doing literally everything we we do. The quality of your work is determined by the quality of your thinking as you reason through the problems you face as you work. The quality of your relationships is determined by the thinking you do in those relationships. Right now, as you read this book, the very sense you make of it comes from your thinking. Your ability to understand and internalize the ideas it contains will be determined by the quality of your thinking as you read it. Therefore, learning to think critically is too important to leave to chance. Critical thinking is the disciplined art of ensuring that you use the best thinking you are capable of in any set of circumstances. Through developed critical capacities, you can take control. You can take command of the thinking that commands you. Steer your own car. No matter what your circumstance or goals, no matter where you are or what problems you face, you are better off if you are in control of your thinking. As a professional, a parent, a citizen, a lover, a friend, a shopper, in every realm and situation of your life, skilled thinking pays off. Poor thinking, in contrast, inevitably causes problems, wastes time and energy, and engenders frustration and pain. Becoming a critical thinker requires that you learn to observe, monitor, analyze, assess, and reconstruct thinking of many sorts in many dimensions of human life. It requires building important habits of mind. It has implications for every act that takes place in your mind. It requires a special form of dedication and perseverance, honesty, and integrity. It can be done only if taken seriously and pursued throughout a lifetime. It's not just a 30-day thing. This gets you started, but it's a lifetime journey. This book shows you how to use your mind to improve your mind. Each of the ideas in this book can help you take command of the mind that is controlling your thoughts, emotions, desires, and behavior. Our hope is not in a miracle transformation, but in laying a foundation for your future intellectual and emotional growth. We are merely scratching the surface of deep and complex topics. We do not provide a quick fix, but rather places to begin. When you begin to take your intellectual growth seriously, you begin to see payoffs in every part of your life. But first, you must wake up your mind. You must begin to see when it causes you problems. You must begin to understand your mind. You must begin to see. You must learn how to trap it when it tries to hide from itself, using one of the many forms of self-deception at which it is naturally skilled. That's the thing. We deceive ourselves all the time with our own thinking. It's like I posted a few days ago about the video about 12 cognitive biases that we have. And a cognitive bias is how we naturally think in certain ways. We're designed that way to protect ourselves, protect our thinking, but it doesn't necessarily give you the correct answer. You must discover some of the trash and nonsense you have unknowingly taken in during years of passive absorption, just sitting there and listening to it and absorbing it, to which all of us are subject. Me too. This book shows you how to begin. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your thinking. Thinking gets us into trouble because we're unclear, muddled, or confused. We jump to conclusions. There you go, confusion. That's a Freudian slip. We jump to conclusions. We fail to think through implications. We lose track of our goals. We're unrealistic. We focus on the trivial. We fail to notice contradictions. We accept inaccurate information. We ask vague questions, and we give vague answers. We ask loaded questions. What's a loaded question? Look it up or we'll cover it later. But it's basically, it has the answer you want kind of built into the question. Ask irrelevant questions. Confuse questions of different types. That's what we talked about last time. Answer questions we are not competent to answer. All of us have an opinion, just like all of us have certain pieces of anatomy, but that doesn't mean we have the knowledge about it. An opinion is not knowledge. Answer questions, come to conclusions based on inaccurate or irrelevant information. Ignore information that does not support our view. That's a big one. Make inferences not justified by our experience. Distort data and present it inaccurately. Fail to notice our inferences. Now remember, the thing to look for too is inference is not the same as deduction. Fail to distinguish inferences from assumptions. Come to unreasonable conclusions. Fail to notice our assumptions. Assumptions are the basis for any argument, any process of thought or opinion. There's an underlying assumption. Make unjustified assumptions. Miss key ideas. Use irrelevant ideas. Form confused ideas. Form superficial concepts. Misuse words. Ignore relevant viewpoints. Cannot see issues from points of view other than our own. Confuse issues of different types. Are unaware of our prejudices. And just to be clear, because our society has degenerated the use of a lot of words, prejudice isn't just about race or things like that. It just means to judge before. To judge before you actually have the information. You just come to a knee-jerk conclusion. Like people who have comments for, and I do it too, who have comments for posted articles without actually reading the article that might have just addressed your comment. Think narrowly, think imprecisely, think illogically, think one-sidedly, think simplistically, think hypocritically, think superficially, think sociocentrically. So from your own social place in society. Think egocentrically, from your own ego's place. Think irrationally. Fail to reason well through problems. Make poor decisions. Are poor communicators. And lack insight into our own ignorance. Now, one of the wisest men of all time, Socrates, his whole point was he was ignorant. He realized his ignorance. I realize my ignorance. The only way to address one's ignorance is to realize it and look at it clearly. I realize that it needs to be addressed. Otherwise, you just walk around like a zombie, like a sleepwalker through life. And not saying that's what some people may not want to do, but make sure you want to do that. Choose to be a zombie. Just like choose to be a thinking person. So improve your thinking, improve your life. This book is about how to improve your thinking to improve your life. Why thinking? Why is thinking significant? Why try to improve your thinking? The answer is simple. Only through thinking can you change whatever it is about your life that needs changing. Even the parts you don't know yet need changing. Only through thinking can you take command of your future. Sound too simple? Read on. Okay? Told you this was long. If it's not working for you, click it off. Don't complain to me that it's too long. Turn it off. Duh. If it's helping you, cool. I mean, it helps me. That's why I'm doing it. Humans routinely, you might say almost constantly, think. For certain, thinking is the main thing we do. From the minute we wake up in the morning, we begin thinking. During all of our waking hours, we're thinking. We cannot escape our thinking, even if we want to. And in fact, that's why I get up so bloody early sometimes, or wake up in the middle of the night. If I don't go right back to sleep and stop thinking, that thinking, the wheels wake me up. And so thinking can be a hazard too in that way. It can interrupt your sleep. We cannot escape our thinking even if we want to. Right now, you're thinking about whether to take seriously what we are saying. Your thinking structures your feelings, shapes your desires, and guides your actions. The way you think about parenting determines how you parent. The way you think about your financial situation determines the financial decisions you make. The way you think when you're at work determines how you function on the job. The problem is that human thinking is often flawed. Many of our regrettable actions emerge from faulty reasoning. In fact, problems in thinking lead to more problems in life than perhaps any other single variable. They lead to conflict and war, pain and frustration, cruelty and suffering. Yet most people are content with their thinking. Because the development of thinking typically is not valued in human societies, people don't tend to trace the problems in their lives to problems in their thinking. Instead, they often live the whole of their lives without recognizing the leading role that thinking plays in it. To improve your quality of life significantly, you must begin to take thinking seriously, to become a student, a lifelong student of thinking. You must learn to observe thinking, examine it, witness its power in action. You must begin to discipline your thinking through knowledge of thinking, and you should practice using that knowledge of thinking daily. You must begin to analyze your thinking, assess your thinking, and improve your thinking. You must engage, in other words, in critical thinking. That's what this book is about, critical thinking. This book explores some of the basic facts about thinking. Although the study of thinking and its relationship to emotions and desires are complex, most everyone can access its essential ideas. The trick is to use basic principles systematically to change your life for the better. In other words, the trick is to put critical thinking into action in your life. You can learn it. You can use it. This book provides some of the essential building blocks. Can your thinking be your problem? To begin to take thinking seriously, you must first recognize the inherently flawed nature of human thought in its normal state. The way you think average every day, it's flawed. It's unconscious. It's automatic. It's not active. It's not critical. Put another way, without active intervention, human thinking naturally develops problems. For example, humans are prejudiced. We stereotype one another. We are often hypocritical. We sometimes justify in our own minds policies and practices that result in stealing, in killing, and torture. We often ignore important problems that we could, with determination and good thinking, solve. Problems such as world hunger, poverty, and homelessness. What is more, when we behave irrationally, our behavior usually seems reasonable to us. When challenged, the mind says to itself, "Why are these people giving me a hard time? I'm just doing what makes sense. What's common sense?" Any reasonable person would see it that way. In short, we naturally think that our thinking is fully justified. As far as we can tell, we're only doing what is right and proper and reasonable. Any fleeting thoughts suggesting we might be at fault typically are overcome by more powerful, self-justifying thoughts. I don't mean any harm. I'm just. I'm fair. It's the others who are wrong. It is important to recognize this self-justifying nature of the human mind is its natural state. In other words, humans don't have to learn self-justifying, self-serving, self-deceptive thinking and behavior. These patterns are innate in every one of us. How does self-deception work in the mind? In other words, how can it be that we can see ourselves as right, even when readily available evidence proves us wrong? One powerful reason is the mind's native, inherent ability to represent unreasonable thoughts as perfectly reasonable. Indeed, this is perhaps the most significant reason the humans fail to recognize their own irrationality. For example, consider a female supervisor who, after interviewing both male and female applicants, always hires women. This supervisor considers herself unbiased and objective. When asked why she hires only female employees, she most likely would give what appear to be logical reasons to support her decisions. Facts, for example, about the applicant's work, experiences, skills, and so on. In supporting her hiring decisions, she would see herself as even-handed, as simply trying to hire the best employees for the job. She might at some level recognize that she hires only women, but justify it by arguing that women are somehow naturally better in the jobs she oversees. Indeed, the only way she can feel justified in her own mind is to see herself as behaving objectively. The material point is that biased thinking appears to the mind as dispassionate, unprejudiced, impartial thinking. We don't see ourselves as wrong. Rather, we see ourselves as right, as doing what is most reasonable in the situation, even when we are dead wrong. Consider the police officer, who often uses excessive force during arrests. This officer likely sees himself as giving criminals what they deserve, getting them off the street so they can't harm innocent people. He couldn't act in this way if he recognized the role that prejudice and the desire for power were playing in his thinking, if he could see that he was irrationally using unnecessary power and force over others who were unable to defend themselves. In his own mind, he is professional and just. However cruel he may be, he doesn't see himself as such. Such is the power of self-deception. Welcome to human nature. We are all, to varying degrees, prejudiced. We all stereotype and deceive ourselves. We see ourselves as possessing the truth. Yet we all fall prey to human egocentricity, although not to the same degree. None of us will ever be a perfect thinker, but we all can be better thinkers. To develop as a thinker, you need to work daily to bring what is unconscious in your thinking to the level of consciousness. You need to discover the problems that exist in your thinking and face them. Only then can you make significant improvements in your thinking and your life. Inherent in human nature is the capacity to rise above your native egocentric patterns of thought. You can use your mind to educate your mind. You can use your thinking to change your thinking. You can remake or transform yourself. It is this side of your nature we hope to stimulate as you work through and internalize the ideas in this book. A how-to list for dysfunctional living. One of the ways you can enhance the power of your mind is by learning to create contrasts and oppositions that make clear precisely what you need to avoid. Opposites. You can formulate opposites, you can clarify boundaries and what the concepts are. In other words, by making poor habits of thought more and more explicit, you can get better and better at avoiding them. We now illustrate this strategy by constructing a set of rules that no reasonable person would knowingly follow. By illuminating dysfunctional, even pathological ways of thinking, it becomes obvious how easy it is to fall prey to them without recognizing yourself doing so. Consider the following, and ask yourself how many of these dysfunctional ways of thinking you engage in. 1. Surround yourself with people who think like you. Then no one will criticize you. We see this on Facebook all the time. We're in different groups according to our interests, and we avoid the groups that would challenge us. We either avoid them entirely, or we go in and argue with everybody about why they're wrong. This is not useful. You need to open your mind and see things opposite from what you usually see. You don't have to engage, but if you can understand from another point of view, you may understand better what's going on there. 2, don't question your relationships. You can then avoid dealing with problems within them. You know, if you're in a partnership, marriage, friendship, work, if you don't question your relationships, you don't have to think about the problems there. Now, 3, if critiqued by a friend or a lover, look sad and dejected and say, "Oh, I thought you were my friend," or "I thought you loved me." You know, there's a difference between questioning someone because you care about them, because you want the better for them, and you want them to examine their lives because something's not working, versus the kind of like acidic back and forth sniping. And if you learn critical thinking, you can see what the difference is. 4, when you do something unreasonable, always be ready with an excuse. Then you won't have to take responsibility. If you can think of an excuse, look sorry and say, "I can't help how I am." 5, focus on the negative side of life. Now, these are all dysfunctional. These are the things that if you want to have a screwed up life, this is all the stuff you want to do. Focus on the negative side of life. Then you can make yourself miserable and blame it on others. 6, blame others for your mistakes. Then you won't have to feel responsible for your mistakes, nor will you have to do anything about them. 7, verbally attack those who criticize you. Then you don't have to bother listening to what they say. 8, go along with the groups you're in. Then you won't have to figure out anything for yourself. 9, act out when you don't get what you want. If questioned, look indignant and say, "I'm just an emotional person. At least I don't keep my feelings bottled up." 10, focus on getting what you want. If questions, say, "If I don't look out for number one, who will?" This list would almost be laughable if these irrational ways of thinking didn't lead to problems in life, but they do. And often. Only when you're faced with the absurdity of dysfunctional or even pathological thinking and can see it work in your life do you have a chance to alter it. The strategies outlined in this book presuppose your willingness to do so. So take your thinking seriously. Our goal is to help you begin to think critically about your thinking, to think about the ways in which your thinking might be causing problems for you or others. As you work through the ideas in this book, simple ideas, intelligently applied, you will begin to improve the habits of your mind. You will become aware of your thinking. When you do, you will assess it. When you assess it, you will improve it. Think of yourself as your own private investigator, probing the workings of your mind to figure out what is going on inside its mental walls. Once you sort out some of the patterns that dominate your thinking, you can take your thinking to the next level. You can target those patterns for improvement. You can build on your strengths. You can determine what to retain in your thinking and what to throw out. Which of your beliefs are sensible and which are senseless. Which are causing problems, which are bringing richness to your life. Which are entrapping or limiting you, and which are freeing or liberating you. No intellectual pain, no intellectual gain. Although most people readily agree that a no pain, no gain attitude is necessary for physical fitness, those same people often give up at the first sign of mental discomfort when working on their minds. If you're unwilling to persevere through intellectual pain, you simply will not develop as a thinker. Without some stress, the condition of the mind, like the body, will not improve. Like it or not, one undeniable fact is no intellectual pain, no intellectual gain. So, expect some mental stress, some discomfort and pain as you proceed through this book. When it comes, face it and work through it. Realize that the most important ideas that humans need to learn are often among the most difficult for the mind to understand and accept, like the fact that we are all naturally egocentric. Recognize that the mind by nature resists change especially change that would force it to see itself in an unfavorable light. So as you begin to internalize the ideas in this book and feel frustrated, uncomfortable, or discouraged, keep pushing forward. Celebrate the fact that you are growing rather than standing still, like most people. Realize that the reward is in the improved quality of your life that will occur in the long run. You must stretch and work the mind if you want it to become flexible and powerful. And if you want to do the work, you need it to do it in the many dimensions of your life. The concepts, principles, and tools of critical thinking. To this point, we have argued that thinking about thinking in a disciplined way is largely ignored in human societies, and that it needs to be at the center of how we live every day. When we realize that there are many problems in human thought, and we want to explicitly target these problems, we can intervene in thought. But we need tools for doing this. And these tools need to emerge from a rich, substantive approach to the mind. Not one is simplistic or superficial. For instance, we need a concept that helps us deal with our intrinsic selfishness and self-validating tendencies. We need a rich concept of critical thought that helps us deal with the forces within us that lead us to seek uncritical approval from others. We need a concept that helps us live more reasonably in all parts of our lives, as well as one that helps us adhere to reasonable standards for thought. Standards like clarity, accuracy, relevance, depth, breadth, logicalness, and fairness. We need a concept of critical thinking that helps us take our thinking apart and examine each part for quality. We need a concept that guides us to fair-minded, critical societies. And as you work through this book, see if you can figure out how each day's idea is related to one or more critical thinking concepts in this section. In this section, we briefly introduced a conception of critical thinking that has emerged through our work in the last 3 decades. To help make the ideas embedded in critical thinking intuitive, we present them primarily in graphic form. Each of the 30 days ideas in this book is intimately connected with this concept. Some are connected to the analysis of thought, some to the assessment of thought, some to the development of intellectual virtues. Others focus on the barriers to critical thought or pathologies in human thought, which we can place under the rough umbrellas of egocentric and sociocentric thought. And still others are implications or contextualizations of critical thought. There is no perfect way to learn critical thinking, no definite order to it. Instead, there are many powerful ideas in critical thinking, any one of which, if deeply internalized, can profoundly change the way you live. Consider, for instance, intellectual empathy, which entails the developed propensity to think within other viewpoints, to think the thoughts and feel the emotions of others in order to appreciate and understand their perspective. If everyone in the world were to take this idea seriously, the pain and suffering caused by humans would be greatly reduced. For instance, people would, almost naturally, imagine what it would be like to experience the feelings of those they were controlling, dominating, oppressing, manipulating, or otherwise mistreating. People would almost literally feel one another's pain. By implication, they would come to more highly value living together peacefully and respectfully. We would move closer to the realization of fair-minded, critical societies. Of course, keep in mind that this way of putting the point is somewhat oversimplified because all the concepts in critical thinking are interconnected. To develop deep and transformative understanding of any one idea in critical thinking is to develop deep and transformative understanding of other essential ideas in critical thinking. For instance, to cultivate within ourselves intellectual empathy, we must also cultivate intellectual humility, the tendency to uncover one's own ignorance, to separate what we know from what we don't know. We cannot effectively think within alternate viewpoints intellectual empathy, if we are not inclined to identify our knowledge and our ignorance within these viewpoints, intellectual humility. In short, the concepts and principles of critical thinking should ultimately be understood in connection with one another, hence the impetus for this section, the driving force, impetus for this section, to help you see some of the more important connections among all the ideas in this book. People throughout the world now embrace a rich, substantive, integrated concept of critical thinking. Not nearly enough, though. We welcome you to this complex of ideas. There's a whole bunch more coming. I think I will break it down. I'm halfway through or so, but there's a lot of graphics that I need to be able to expose you to, and I have gone for a while. So hi, Kurt. Hey, Kaoki. We will continue this tomorrow. Have a good day and try to improve your thinking.